Welcome to this episode of Conversations. My guest today is Nick Troiano, who is running as an independent for the U.S. House of Representatives, Pennsylvania 10th District. And he's got a fascinating story. As you can see, he's quite young, but he's got a really good story and some great ideas. So I thought it'd be nice to have him on the show and talk a little bit. Welcome, Nick.
It's so great to be with you.
Yeah, great. So what is your background? I mean, wait a minute. How old are you?
Well, I'm 25 years old.
You're 25.
Which I should point out makes me constitutionally eligible to serve in the House of Representatives.
Okay. Good point. Good point. How did you decide to get into politics?
Well,
it's a big field, and you're jumping big.
Well, I got involved in student council in second grade, and it sort of all snowballed from there.
Second grade?
Right.
Really?
And what I mean by that is being involved in student government early on really gave me a satisfying experience of teaching me what it means to be a member of a community, what it means to work with others to leave your community a bit better off for those who will follow you. And I found that to be challenging, I found that to be satisfying, and that ultimately led me to think about my community more broadly than just my school or my town, eventually my state and my country. Mm-hmm. And thanks to a great experience I had at a program called Boys State, which the American Legion runs for high school juniors every year, which is a civic simulation in Shippensburg University. That inspired me to go to Washington to study American government, and that's where I completed my master's degree at Georgetown University.
So your undergraduate degree is in?
Government.
And your master's degree?
Correct. And not only studying government, but having this hands-on experience in our nation's capital, I saw firsthand, not just how broke our country is, but how broken our political system has gotten. And as a young person, seeing these challenges headed my way and the way of my generation, I decided I wanted to get more involved sooner rather than later. Mm-hmm.
So you made the jump, and you're doing this as an independent, and you're not accepting money from corporations or any thing like that. You're really raising money grassroots.
Right. Well, I think candidates can either be part of the system or part of the solution, but they challenge to do both. And I think what's wrong with politics right now is that it's become much too partisan and polarized, and it's also become much too dominated by special interests. And so therefore, as a candidate, I've decided to run outside of the party system and only accept contributions from individuals so that if I'm elected, I'll be able to truly represent the people and not the party bosses or the campaign contributors.
Mm-hmm. So how's that working for you?
It's a challenge to do it this way.
Yeah.
If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. But I think we need real leadership back in our political system again. And I think leading is sometimes taking the harder path. So it's a challenge, but I think it's going well. We're about to announce our second quarter fundraising, which we're very pleased with. We are also about to complete our signature gathering to get on the ballot for the November's election. And there's just such an appetite out there among people who are signing our petitions for another option besides the status quo. Mm-hmm. And as I explained to people, there's going to be 3 candidates on your ballot in November, but you really only have 2 choices: to continue to do the things the way it's being done now with both parties, or to try something new. And I think that this election is a try something new election.
Let's say you did win and you're elected. How does that work then? Because you're still the outsider, going into a whole bunch of folks who are insiders and have been around a long time. What's your plan? Mm-hmm. What's your game plan, I guess? Right. I mean, how do you make that work?
Well, my first obligation as a representative from this district would be to serve the constituents through my office. Mm-hmm. And I have a plan to vastly improve constituent services by increasing accessibility to my office, such as having a representative available 24 hours a day, increasing the effectiveness of the office, particularly by appointing someone to deal with economic matters in our district, and transparency. I think that people ought to know what my schedule is every day in a visitor's log of my office, so they know how my time is being spent. So that's first and foremost. But beyond that, how to be effective as a legislator in our Congress It will be tough too as an independent, perhaps the only independent in our Congress, because there are none right now. But I think we have to take a first step towards long-term reform, and in my mind, that's going to be electing many more independents to the Congress in such number where a new caucus built from the center out can deny both parties a majority and therefore exercise great influence over the institution. So I don't make any promises that I can change everything that's wrong with our Congress overnight, but I do know that my election this year could be the first domino in a chain to fall to allow that to happen in the future, once people see that it's possible and can reimagine how politics are done in our country.
You're not saying, I'm going to change everything overnight. I mean, you're looking at 4 years, 6 years, 12 years of gradual change. So your vision really extends outward and is pretty realistic.
Yeah, I think it's aspirational. I don't personally aspire to be a career politician in office for the rest of my life, but I do want to remain committed to this cause, which is trying to reform a political system so that it's focused on conciliation rather than conflict, so that it's focused on representing people rather than the parties, and so that it begins solving the big problems before us rather than remaining gridlocked as it is today. And I think that's going to require new people running for office. I think it's going to require systemic changes to the way our political and electoral processes work, such as changing our primary system and campaign and finance reform system. And it's going to require people taking ownership of our democracy again by participating. Only about half of people in our country right now vote, much less probably pay attention to politics on a regular basis. And I think it's going to take all three of these avenues to really get our system working again.
One of the things you said in one of the other interviews is, as you're going out on the street to talk to people, a lot of people say they're not political or they're not interested in politics. So what's your answer?
It is disheartening to hear when people say, "Oh, I don't want to talk to you. I'm not very political." Well, I try to remind them that you might not be interested in politics, but everyone is political because we're all members of our political community, our United States of America. And with that comes responsibility, some civic responsibility that we each have, and a realization that politics impacts us every day. If you drive our roads, if your children attend our schools, if you are counting on the benefits you've earned through our major social insurance programs, if that matters to you, then you have a stake in the outcomes of these debates that are happening in our state capital and in our nation's capital, or even down to your local government. And as Jefferson said, we don't have government of the majority. We have government of the majority who participate. So our dysfunctional politics doesn't reflect, I don't think, where most Americans are today, but it does reflect those who are participating. And those people right now are on our political extremes, and we need to reawaken and re-engage those who are sort of in the sensible center, as I like to describe, in both parties, and those who choose not to affiliate with either party.
Out on the road, you're talking with 3 generations of people. People your age, people your parents' age, and people your grandparents' age. What's been the difference in reaction and give and take among those 3? So when you go talk to somebody your age, and I would think that people your age are less political, more apathetic, less tuned in. Am I guessing right?
Well, I think my generation, the millennials, are the next great civic generation, but it just so happens...
I agree. I do agree there.
But it just so happens that we don't view traditional politics as a way to make a difference. We've come of age in an era of government dysfunction, and so we are marshaling our energy and resources outside of politics, whether that's volunteering or social entrepreneurship. Right. But my message to my generation has been traditional politics is going to be the biggest levers we have to make a difference and to see the kind of changes we'd like in our country and in our world. And so we need to be involved. And I think young people have been waiting for a way to express themselves and to be involved. And I think many are seeing that in my campaign, not just because there's a younger candidate running, but because there's a candidate who's actually talking about the long-term challenges facing our country and putting forward sensible solutions to them, rather than just pandering to the base of both sides in a traditional sort of soundbite campaign.
So they're responding to that?
I do believe they are responding to it. I mean, I've done a bunch of high school and college visits, and more younger volunteers are signing up to be part of the campaign. And younger people, not just in the district, but across the country, who want to lend their time and talent to help the campaign in some way too, because they believe in the promise that this could be how politics can be done in the future. But beyond the younger generations, I think we're getting good response from middle-aged or older Americans too, in large part because they are concerned about the legacy they're leaving behind. You know, in our country, we have always found pride in the idea that we're going to leave more opportunity in a better country to those who follow. But for the first time now, a majority of Americans think that might not be the case. And that's a large part as a result of today's dysfunctional politics. And so there's, I think, great support coming from older generations who know that we're setting up the next generation perhaps not to be as well off as they were, and are supporting my campaign as a way to change that.
How are you doing in the campaign? Doing pretty well?
Personally?
Or, well, as far as success, I mean, you're out there all the time and you're talking with, like I said, 2 or 3 generations of people. You're running as an independent. You've got to have 1,000 obstacles in trying to crack some of these walls. And yet, I look at a couple of the polls, and it seems as though you're doing pretty well. Yeah,
from a campaign perspective, I think we are doing well. You know, like I said, on our fundraising and ballot access end, in the social and earned media that we've been able to get so far, we're putting a robust effort into place. And we have some of the top advisors lending in kind their talent to the campaign, including a guy named Russ Verney, who was Ross Perot's campaign manager and advisor in the 90s for his independent presidential campaigns, and some top support from national leaders like Senator Alan Simpson, who's a former Republican and co-chair of the President's Fiscal Commission. So we are able to, and we are making really good progress in the district. And I think if there ever was a time for this to happen, it's certainly this year. You know, Gallup just released a poll that found only 7% of Americans now have any confidence in our institution. And over 60% think both parties are doing such a terrible job that a third might be needed. So the electoral environment is primed for such a campaign. The challenge of our campaign then is just to get our message and our name out to let people know they will have another option this November.
You've done quite a bit of national media too. What's the interest there? Just, hey, here's a pretty sharp young kid running for Congress?
Well, we have gotten significant media attention to the campaign because I think people recognize this is where it's headed. This is where politics is headed in our country. You know, a majority of millennials now don't affiliate with either party. They consider themselves to be independent. We are seeing that eventually we're going to have to deal with both our debt problem and our climate problem, and that's going to maybe play more of a focus in campaigns going forward. So I think this campaign is on time, if not ahead of our time, and a lot of the attention that we're getting nationally is a recognition that, like I said, this might be the future of where things are headed. And I think that is a breath of fresh air for many people who are sick of politics as usual.
How many hours a day do you put in?
Probably at least 14.
I would think.
I would, you know, it's a get up in the morning to the moment you fall asleep effort. And I knew that going into the campaign, that this was going to be an all-consuming effort, not just for me, but for the incredible people who I'm lucky to have with me on staff. With the promise I did make to myself in the beginning is that I would work the hardest I can, but I would also enjoy this process. And so far it has been very enjoyable and satisfying to me, especially when I have the opportunity to register new voters and bring people into the process. That is what I hope this campaign would do. is not just try to persuade the regular voters why I'm the best candidate, but bring a lot more people into our political process who have been so disillusioned and dissatisfied that they no longer choose to participate. And I think we are succeeding with that.
You said something a while ago about you're not looking at this as your career, I guess, which kind of threw me because most people who go into politics go into it as a career. So if you succeed and you serve a couple terms and then get out, what do you want to do for the rest of your life?
I would like to see this model of a campaign be scaled to districts across the country in future election cycles. I think I can be most effective in realizing that vision by being the first example of getting into Congress in this way. But that's a vision that I want to try my best to see through over the next chunk of life here. But I've always been entrepreneurially inclined. I like to think of myself as a creative person, and not just in the sense of creativity, but liking also to create things. And getting back into the business world would be appealing to me at some point. You know, I started off at age 16 owning and operating a mobile food concession truck called Hot Diggity Dogs, and that was some of the most fun that I've had, a fulfilling experience. And getting back into entrepreneurship is something that I have my eyes set on too.
So you were 16 and had a mobile hot dog unit? Yeah,
we ran it at the ballpark and at some county fairs.
So you got the food inspection license and the whole thing. Bureaucracy thing.
Right.
Interesting. So what brand of hot dogs did you sell?
We sold Sabrettes, and we had the best deal in town, which was 2 hot dogs, a can of soda, and a bag of chips for $4.
That is a good deal. If you ever go back into it, call me. I will give you some business. I want to jump over to your campaign. You're running on almost no money. You're running on whatever individuals give you. But most of your campaign, most of your efforts are through the social media. How's that working? And tell me what the elements of the campaign.
So just to take a step back, 30 years ago, the average winning congressional campaign cost a little over $600,000 in today's money. Today, it costs a little over $1.5 million. Campaigns have become much more expensive. But I also think they're also operating off of an old model where most of their funding is going to television advertising and high-paid consultants. And if you look at the FEC disclosures of candidates in this district or others, that's exactly the case. I think the modern campaign can be run much more cost efficiently by having a strong grassroots effort on the ground with volunteers, leveraging earned media through traditional print, TV, and radio, and through a robust social media presence. And these 3 things don't cost a lot of money.
Right.
They just take some creativity and elbow grease, and that's really what our campaign is focused on doing. In social media in particular, this is sort of still an evolving sphere of communication.
Absolutely.
And it's allowing us to get our message out there, not just among those who choose to like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter, but in creating and sharing content that those people want to share with their friends. And that's happening because when I'm out there collecting signatures or talking to voters, a lot of them say, I just saw your video last week. We do a weekly video on YouTube, for example. And that's helping to get the message out, and it's not costing the campaign a dime. So how much have you raised is a good question, but it's also somewhat of an outdated question. It's really how are you spending your time is I think, the important question of a modern campaign.
Good answer. So you're on Facebook and you have a Twitter account and you do videos that you post to YouTube. Anything else with the social media?
That's where our main effort is focused.
Now I have to say the videos especially are really well done. You're very concise, you're very clear, you break it down into one small subject area so that you can talk about it, you keep it within 3 minutes. And then over on the side you get this nice series of categories, and went down through them yesterday and thought, well, this is really organized. Are you that organized, or do you just have good people?
It's a combination of both. So the weekly Chat with Troiano videos are not just an opportunity for me to talk about an idea that can help solve a problem, that can get bipartisan support, but to help create a conversation with people. So I want to end on a question and get people's feedback, because I don't think candidates or public officials have all the answers. We are smarter together, and I think having that conversation, which we can do online nowadays, is really important. And these videos are a way to get that done. The team does provide a lot of help in the production, but I am proud that I take time to write, record, and edit these myself. I think it's really important to have this authentic communication with voters that isn't impeded by, whatever consultant has some poll-tested language they want you to say. This is coming right from my heart.
Well, I think that's one of the things that impressed me the most, is it comes across as real and sincere, and in your own language.
Right.
And people can tell.
And that's the thing, I think people can tell.
Oh, yeah.
We have good detectors on what kind of things are being fed by those seeking our votes nowadays. And that's something that I think how our campaign seeks to distinguish ourselves is, I think political campaigns an opportunity to exercise political leadership by telling, as you know it, the people what you think the facts are of the big problems facing the country, and what are some solutions that can realistically get enough support to pass through our Congress. And that's where my platform is really focused.
You've said somewhere, I saw in research that I've forgotten where now, your family has been really important to you. How so? As far as support, did I remember right, your grandfather was very important and inspirational?
Yep, I think we're all products of the people that have surrounded us in our lives and have lent us their love and advice and mentorship. And that's certainly the case with me. I mean, my parents have been incredibly supportive to me as I've gone through school and with every crazy endeavor I undertake, including running for office this year. And
what's that boy up to now?
Yeah, right. But their support structure has led me to be able to take greater risks and to be able to really pursue my passions, knowing that they're behind me and knowing that I have their support. And I've also been fortunate to have great mentors. A guy named Doug Bailey was one of the first people I met in Washington. I couldn't have been more fortunate for it. Unfortunately, he passed away last year, but he spent most of his life as one of the first national political consultants when political consultants were performing a public service rather than after their bottom line. And he taught me through his experience how politics can be public service, and how young people can play an important role and always have in our politics, and really gave me the confidence to go out and do something like this. And my grandpa's another one I speak of, who taught me the meaning of service too, not in politics, but in life. He was a World War II veteran. He came back and became a New York City firefighter in New York. And even after he retired, little acts of service, driving seniors to church on Sundays who don't have rides and that kind of thing. And so I think that helped shape the kind of person I am today and wanting to serve. And I think you don't have to be elected to serve either. I think I see this year that I've taken away from a potential job and a paycheck and away from anything else I could be doing as my year of service. Because at the end of the day, no matter how the election in November goes, I think I will have made a significant and positive impact in our community and more broadly in trying to get people to think differently about politics.
That's a good way to look at it, yeah. I hadn't thought about it that way. We're talking about the 10th district. That's huge. How do you were saying earlier before we started, you've put on 10,000 miles?
So
just
far.
in this chunk of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, just
so far. Yeah, right.
Yeah, there are 15 counties in central northeastern Pennsylvania that comprise the 10th district. It's the second largest in the state, and it's a product of what we call partisan gerrymandering. The state legislators in Harrisburg have drawn districts in a way that protect the advantage of their party. So in this district, it's to pack as many Republicans in and it's to take as many Democrats out to keep it a safe district for the incumbent. Well, unfortunately for them, that may be true in a two-way race, but in a three-way race with an independent, that math changes, which is why I think our campaign is competitive this year. But the result of that gerrymandering is that we're left with a not very sensible and very large geographical area to cover. But that's what we're doing every day, and we're excited to, this Wednesday, launch what I'm calling the Back to the Future Tour. A supporter lent a 1981 DeLorean to the campaign, so I'm going to be driving that around and doing events in each of the 15 counties.
People need to go to your Facebook page and see that,
And hopefully follow along. We'll be doing a video about it too. And the whole message of the campaign is we need to get back to a politics that serves the people in order to save the future of our country. And politics used to work for us. I think many people remember it when it was more about public service and self-preservation among our elected officials. That's what we need to get back to, when both parties could find some common ground and work together and solve problems, rather than just position themselves for the next election in the sort of scorched earth politics we have today. And we need to do that in order to solve the big problems facing the country. We have $17 trillion in growing debt. We have an unsustainable level of carbon emissions that are threatening our environment. We have an economy that is increasingly benefiting those at the top and squeezing those in the middle and leaving many people altogether behind. These are unsustainable trends that are becoming worse and more difficult to solve with time. And so now is the moment where this idea of getting back to a politics that serves the people to save our future is so important. And that is the message that we're going to be taking on the road throughout the month of July. On my website, which is nicktroiano.com/tour, people can see the whole schedule and hopefully come out to meet me in person when I'm in their county.
I'm curious, as you're going out and meeting people, especially middle-aged people, you must be running into three different types. You're running into Republicans, you're running into Democrats, you're running into the folks that say, I'm not involved. So who are you winning over? I mean, you've got to convert some of these people. Are Republicans responding to you? Are Democrats responding to you? Are the loners out here, are they responding to you?
Well, I think
you're going to say yes to all above.
Well, we are, I think, getting support. I mean, many people from all parties have signed our petition and are supporting the campaign. But when you strip away party affiliation, are you a Republican or a Democrat? Most people will then affiliate themselves by their ideology. And I think from an ideological perspective, the kind of people that are supporting the campaign are moderate in their nature. They are skeptical of a large government, for example, and unsustainable spending. But on the other hand, they may just be just as skeptical about a totally hands-off market that has no regulation. So I think it's people who are willing to see that we don't have black and white issues or policy options, that each of the tough challenges we confront has a sort of shade of gray in it and may take a more nuanced approach, and that both sides have some good ideas to offer that should be on the table and duly considered. So those are the type of people that exist in both parties and in no party that I think are seeing promise in this campaign.
Good answer. That's interesting. So you're really, what you're doing is getting out there and getting beyond the politics into the human side of what we're all about and what we're interested in.
And it could be people who may be very conservative or very liberal, but also just recognize that the political status quo is not serving us. When special interests are dumping millions of dollars into campaigns, or when both parties can't even talk to each other and the result is just gridlock, they may not agree with me on every issue, but they do know that a Nick Troiano representative in Congress is going to be a part of a more functional government, and that's the reason perhaps that they're supporting me. Because we're never going to, if you approach every election and looking for the person who aligns with you perfectly on every issue, you'll never find him or her. It's really someone who has the kind of character and judgment that you can trust will do the right thing. And that has to be a person who is independent enough to exercise that character and judgment, which I don't think can happen within our current system, and that's why I'm running outside of it.
Very quickly, because we're running out of time. One of the questions I read in the research was, if you were independent, there's pressure to caucus with one side or the other. How do you handle that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would not caucus with either party. I mean, I've done some research. I've talked to the House parliamentarian. I've consulted with one of the two independent senators in the United States Senate. And there's going to be some challenge, but I think I can be effective still outside of the party structure. I can still lobby for a committee assignment. It'll be up to the party to give me one or not. I can still advocate to be heard on major legislation on the floor. It'll be up to them to decide that. But I'm not there to be co-opted by either side. I'm there to prove that there's going to be a new way of doing things and help build a third force within the Congress in size large enough, as I indicated earlier, that can exercise greater influence over the Congress. And that is where my focus is going to be. So in addition to making sure we have the best constituent services as we can, it's going to be trying to, frankly, disrupt what's not working in our Congress and offer an alternative way of doing things.
Good. We are out of time. Nick Troiano, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being on the show, and good luck.
Thanks.
I'm Dennis Miller, and we'll do it again.